Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome, my dear student, in the course of Introduction to Logic and Reasoning. In the last lecture, we discussed about the equivalency and material equivalence of the statements, or you can say propositions, in the last lecture. And we have discussed that how statements are equivalent, and how we can find they are equivalent or not equivalent. And we have also solved this exercise that has been given in the exercise number 4. We have also solved this question, and I shared the solution with you too. So I hope that you all go through this exercise. Now, in today's lecture, we are going to discuss about the tautologies, contradiction, and contingent statements. My dears, as you know that we are discussing from the last lecture about the formal logic. In the previous lectures, we have discussed about the informal logic, where the conceptual understanding of the statements and preposition and arguments are must. But in formal logic, as I have told you and we discussed in the lectures, that it is not important to conceptually know about the meaning and you can say the concept of the argument or statement that has been hidden over there or given over there, but we are just interested in the form that either it result into true or false. We will just make a formulation in the form of treble, and we will then conclude that the argument is false or true, or the statement is false or true. So in the today lecture, we are going to discuss about such type of statements that is always true. So how it's possible that a statement is always true? So there are certain conditions where the statements and prepositions or arguments are always true. So such a type of situation or a virtual form of the statements are called tautology. Similarly, there are statements which is always false. That is called contradictions. The statements that false in virtue of its form always is called contradiction statements. And similarly, there are a number of statements that either may be false or may be true, depends upon the actual situation in the world or in the reality. That is called contingent statements. So let us have a look that how a statement is always true, in which form the statement is always true. So if we take the example that Matt is either 40 years old or not 40 years old, if we just convert into standard form and then symbolize it and then make an expression of it, then it may be like if represent Matt is either 40 by P or not 40 years old by not P, so P or not P. So P or not P, we know that if one P is true, the other will be false, and if the one P is false, then the other will be true. So P true or false will always result into true. False and true will always into true. So in this type of statement, it will always result into true. Clear? So this is called what? This is called tautology statement, or tautology form of the statement. So consider the next example. Matt is both 40 years old and not 40 years old. Clear? So now here it is a conjunction statement. As we know that the above statement has a disjunction, and this statement has a conjunction because there isn't both or and operator lie here. So now in this statement, Matt is both 40. So if we represent by this part of the statement by P and not 40 years old, not P, so P dot not P will always result into false, because if one of the values is true and the other is false, it will result into false. And if the one is false and the other is true, it will always result into false. So this type of statement will always result into false. It is called what? It is called contradictory statement or contradiction. Similarly, if we just take another example, Matt is either 39 years old or 40 years old. So in this case, Matt is either 39-year-old or 40-year-old. So in this case, we know that it is true, because if Matt is 39-year-old, they and not 40-year-old, that result is true. But if Matt is 37-year-old or 40 years old, so now here the problem will occur. Matt is either 37-year-old are 40 years old. So now the problem is he is not 39-year-old, he is 37-year-old are 40 years old. So now in this case it will result into false. So the statement that depends upon the reality of the situation of the world, where it may be result into true, may be result into false, such type of statement is called contingent statements. Okay, so if we just construct a table for these values, that how we can formulate a table, truth table for it. So if we just take two values, two variables or two statements A and B, and we just put the possible values. If both are true, one is true, the other is false. One is false, the other is true, and both is false. These are the possible formulations or possible values or situation of the statements. So you know that if A implies B, or A asserts B, or A, so it always result into true. If you look at the statement, true and true result into true, then false or true result into true, then true or false and result into true, true and true result into true. So it will always result into true. Therefore, it is called a tautology table, or tautology for of the statement. Similarly, if you took another one like A, B, and we put the possible situation values that may be occur or may be happen here, so and then we construct a truth table for A or B dot not A not B. So in this case, if we just put the values, and you know that the bold values that is always result into false is the result of the statement, but you should the not highlighted, or you can say the dim variables that has been given true, 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 false, and then not A, not B. So if we just formulate these two values into the third one, then it always result into false. Clear? So therefore, true, true and false, false and false will result into false, false and false will result into false, and we know that true and false will result into false, true and false will result into false. When the statements are have a conjunction between them, then we know that in either case, if one of the value is true false, then the result. If both the values are false, then it must be false. So in this case, if we look at the values in the column number 3 and 4, and we just make the conjunction function between them, then we result all these values into false. So this is the way in which we say that it is always result into contradiction. So this in this way we have just formulated two tables where we come to know that it is a tautology or it is a contradiction, and it may be the situation that there are a number of truth expressions and truth tables that result into contingents. So it may possible, it depends upon the values. So it's mean that either the values may be result into tautology, or may result into contradiction, or may result into the contingent values. So it depends upon the situation. Let us take another exercise that A implies A dot B, or you can say A asserts A dot B. So let's go and watch how we can formulate the table for it and how we can solve this exercise. So inshallah, in the next lecture we will just try to solve these exercises by just showing you that either it results into true or it results into false. Okay, so you should go to the my YouTube channel. You should subscribe that. You should also like that, and you should also press the bell icon, that you on the daily basis when I upload your lecture, you should just receive the lecture, and you should go to that and also you will find the solution of all exercises I will discuss you at there. Okay, thank you very much, my dear students. So okay, my dear student, let us discuss our exercise number 15 now. As we have discussed the case of tautology, contradiction and contingent, let us take the first question, exercise number 5, that A implies that A dot B. So in this case, if we just put the values, possible values of A and B, two variables, then we know that the possible values are true, 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 false, false, true, and false, false. In this case, A dot B will result into what? A and B will result into true. Then if one of the value is false, then false, and if both the values are false, then also false. Then now A implies that, or A asserts A dot B. What would be its possible values? If we know that when the result is false, we have to compare what? We have to compare this A with the third values of the columns of B. So in this case, let us take a look that what would be its result? So in this case, if true and true, if A is true and A dot B is true, now then the result will be true, okay? Because if the result, if the conclusion is true, then the result will be true. Then adhere with us, we have know that adhere with us is true, but adhere we have false. Then the result will be false because the conclusion is false. And the third case, A is false, but the result also false. So false result into false. We know that if the result is true and if the premise is true and the conclusion is false, then the result is false. In this case, it also results into true. Okay. In the last, we know that if F is the result is false and the premise is false and the result false, then also result into true. So one of, it is contingent values. Because why it is contingent values? Because we know that one value is one conclusion is false and the other all true. So in this case, we can say that it is what? It is contingent. It is contingent statement. Okay. So now let us take the case of the second one, that where we know that we have the possible A dot B implies that, or assertion is a result into, or assert that not A implies not B. So in this case, we will put all the possible expression right here in the values of A, B, then A dot B, not A implies not B. So if we put all these values, like the case A dot B result into this, not A implies not B will result into this. Okay, how not A is not A result into not B. So you have to put, if you are facing problem or complication, then you put another two columns of not A and not B, and then you should make a connection of implies that, or assertion that, are result into another column. But as I have the experience to doing this, therefore I am not putting those columns, I am directly solving the problem. So in this case, like the example, not A. So not A mean false, not A false, not A true, not A true. So not B in the case of this, where the values will be false and where will not be false. This will be false, this will be true, this would be again false, and this would be true. So now A, not A implies not B would be the case that when the result is true, the expression result into true. So true, true, false, and true. This is the result of not A into not B. Now we will combine the whole result. If we will combine the whole result, that A dot B, true and true will result into true, false and true will result into true, false and false will result into true, because we know that if the premise is false, then the result will be false, and if the result is false, if the premise is false and the result true, then also result in true. This is the case that we have discussed in the premise. We discussed in the case of what? In the case of when we are going put values in the assertion or implies that expression or questions. So in the last in the next example, so this one case is what? When all the values are true, then what you will say that what it is tautology. Okay, this expression result in tautology. So next take the next example, question number 4 in the exercise, that A implies A, and then this expression implies that B dot not B. So A implies A. A implies A mean what? A implies A mean true. ठीक है ना? And if it is true, then the result will be true. If it is true, then the result will be true. If it is false, it results into false. Then again it's true. False into false. False result into false. Then again it's true. So A implies A, or A result into A will result and give us these values. So B dot not B. B dot not B will result into these values. Okay. One of the values false and the result will be false, we know that. So B dot not B will result into these values. So if we just put these all values in the combined expression, A union A implies that B dot not B. So take the case that when the result is false, then we say that if the premise is true, the result false, the premise is true, the result false, the premise is true, the result false, the premise is true, the result false. When the result is false, so all the possible output values are false, then we know that it is contradiction. So it is result into contradiction. So we solve 3 examples from the exercise. One resulted into the contingent, the other one resulted into tautology, and the one is resulted into the contradiction. So now you have to solve the other questions in the exercise number 15 to complete this task. Okay, Thank you very much, beta. Thank you. Thank you very much.